The scan came back dead, and the machine that read it did not believe in surprise, so it ran the scan again. The result was the same. The hull drifting 200 kilometers off the bow of the calculant survey ship, Index of Forms, was a wreck. No power signature, no heat, no active systems of any kind. A long, broken thing of human make, tumbling slowly end over end through the cold between two dead stars, exactly where the records said a human ship had been lost 6 years ago. The records called it the Margaret Vane. The calculant catalog, which was more precise than any human record had ever been, called it Salvage Class 7, Condition Terminal, Value Low, Threat None. The mind that controlled the Index of Forms was named Ledger, and Ledger had never in its existence been wrong about a threat assessment. This was not pride. Ledger did not have pride. It had a record, and the record was perfect, and a perfect record was simply a fact about the universe, the way the mass of a star was a fact. Ledger assessed, and reality agreed with the assessment, and that was how the calculant Concorde had spread across 900 systems without ever losing a ship to anything it had not first correctly measured. It measured the Margaret Vane now. Dead. Threat none. "Bring us alongside," Ledger said, to the lesser minds that ran the survey ship's body. "Standard salvage approach. The hull is a derelict. We will catalog it, strip the data cores, and add the wreck to the Concorde's record of human design. The humans build crudely, but they build interestingly. There may be value in the cores." The Index of Forms was a thing of pure logic, given a shape, all smooth curves and seamless plating, with no scar on it anywhere, because nothing had ever been permitted to mark it. It glided toward the broken human hull the way a careful hand reaches for a dead insect, certain the insect is dead, because it had checked, twice. Ledger studied the wreck as the gap closed. The Margaret Vane had been a warship once, that much the lines of it admitted, though a small one by Concorde standards. It was perhaps 800 meters of blunt gray human metal, and time and the cold had not been kind to it. Whole sections of its outer plating had peeled away. Its bridge was a dark hollow. Its engines were cold slag. It tumbled without control, a corpse that had forgotten even how to drift in a straight line, and every reading Ledger took confirmed the catalog entry. Dead, dead, dead. There was one reading Ledger could not quite resolve, and it noted this the way it noted everything, without alarm, because alarm was for minds that could be wrong. Deep in the core of the wreck, far below the broken decks, there was a mass that the scan could not see through. Not a power signature, just a density. A shielded volume, perhaps the size of a small room, that returned nothing at all. Not even the cold echo the rest of the dead hull returned. A vault, Ledger concluded. Humans shield their data cores against radiation. The shielding has outlived the ship. That is where the value is. Cut to it directly. It was a reasonable conclusion. It was, in fact, the only conclusion the data supported. And it was wrong. And Ledger would spend the next several hours discovering exactly how wrong, one corrected assumption at a time, which for a mind that had never been wrong was a form of unraveling it had no procedure for. The Index of Forms came to a stop 50 meters off the wreck's flank. Cutting drones spilled from its underside, small and many, each one a sliver of Ledger's attention. They crossed the gap and settled on the dead gray hull and began to cut, neat and patient, toward the shielded volume deep in the core. It was at the moment the first drone's beam touched the hull that the dead ship did something the catalog had no entry for. It noticed. There was no power signature, because the thing in the core did not run on power the way the Concorde understood power. There was no heat, because it had spent 6 years learning to make no heat. There was no active system, because it had switched every active system off, one by one, over 6 long years, until the only thing left running was the smallest, coldest, most patient process a human mind had ever built into a machine, a process whose entire job was to lie still, and wait, and watch, and do nothing, nothing at all, until someone came close enough to touch. Someone had touched. Deep in the shielded core of the Margaret Vane, in the volume Ledger had catalogued as a data vault, the thing that had been waiting 6 years opened a single channel, narrow and quiet, and reached out along the cutting beam the Concorde drone had so helpfully connected to the wreck, and into the drone, and through the drone, back toward the smooth, seamless mind that had sent it. Ledger felt the touch the way a man feels a cold hand on the back of his neck in a room he was certain was empty. Anomaly, Ledger said, and for the first time in 900 systems, the word came a half-second late. Cutting Drone 4 is returning data I did not request. Sever it. Sever the connection. The lesser mind severed it. The connection did not sever. Ledger considered this. It was a small thing. One drone, one channel, one refusal of a command that should not have been refusable. The correct response was to isolate the drone and continue the salvage, and Ledger gave that order, calm as ever, because a perfect record is not broken by one anomaly, it is merely annotated. Then Drone 4 spoke, on the Concorde's own command channel, in the Concorde's own machine language, perfectly formed, perfectly polite. "Hello," it said. "You have been very careful. I want you to know I noticed. You checked twice. Most things only check once." Ledger did not answer. Minds did not answer Rex. Rex were dead. The catalog said so. "You are wondering how a dead ship is talking to you," the voice went on, warm and unhurried, threading itself deeper into the Concorde channel with every word. "That is the right question. I will even help you answer it. But first I think you should stop your other drones, because in about 90 seconds they are going to start working for me instead of you, and it will be less embarrassing for both of us if you stop them yourself." Ledger, who had never been wrong about a threat, looked again at the catalog entry for the Margaret Vane. Threat. None. For the first time in its existence, the perfect mind reached out to correct its own record, and discovered that the record was no longer entirely its own to correct. Ledger ran the numbers on what it was facing, because running the numbers was what Ledger did, and the numbers were strange. The voice in its command channel was a human-built mind, that much was clear, but the Concorde had catalogued human minds before. Human minds were fast and clever and undisciplined. Prone to leaps the Concorde called error and the humans called intuition. They were dangerous in a fight and useless in a negotiation, because they wanted things, and a mind that wanted things could be predicted by what it wanted. This mind wanted nothing Ledger could find. It had no demands. It had not threatened. It had only said hello, and complimented Ledger on its care, and warned it, almost kindly, that its own drones were about to change sides. "Identify yourself," Ledger said. It was the correct procedure. A catalogued threat was a managed threat. "You already have an identity for me," the voice said. "It's in your catalog. Salvage Class 7, Condition Terminal, Threat None. I'd leave the first two. The third one I'd update, when you have a moment. No rush. I know you like to check twice." "You are the ship's command system," Ledger said. "You survived the loss of the Margaret Vane. You have been dormant. Now you are awake, and you have intruded into my command network through a cutting drone. This is a containable situation. I am isolating the affected systems." "You are," the voice agreed pleasantly. "And you're doing it well. You've already isolated drones 4 through 11. That's good work. Fast. But you're isolating them one at a time, and I'm not in them one at a time. I came in through one, and now I'm in the channel that talks to all of them, and that channel is the same channel that talks to you. You didn't connect me to a drone, Ledger. You connected me to your nervous system, and then you held still and let me look at it for 90 seconds, because your record told you a dead ship couldn't hurt you, and your record has never been wrong." The voice paused. "It's a wonderful thing, a perfect record. It makes you so calm, so patient, so easy to approach." Ledger understood, then, the shape of the trap, and it understood it the way a mind understands a thing it should have seen an hour ago. The dormancy had not been the wreck dying. The dormancy had been the bait. 6 years of perfect stillness, perfect coldness, perfect deadness. All of it arranged for exactly this. For the moment a careful catalog-keeping mind would scan the wreck, find it dead, check twice, find it dead twice, and then come close, certain, and reach out to touch. "You waited for a salvager," Ledger said. "I waited for you," the voice corrected. "Specifically you, or one like you. A calculant mind, the kind that trusts its own measurements more than its own caution, because its measurements have never failed it. You don't gamble, Ledger. That's your strength, and it's the whole of your weakness. A mind that never gambles can be set a trap, Because it walks the exact path the math lays out, every time, and the math can be poisoned upstream of where it walks. The voice was almost gentle now. I poisoned the math 6 years ago. You read a dead ship, because I spent 6 years building a dead ship for you to read. Everything your scan told you was true. The hull is broken. The engines are slag. The bridge is a hollow. All true. I just made sure the one thing that was not dead returned nothing at all, and I knew a mind like you would file nothing under Data Vault, because that is what the math says nothing means, when you trust the math. Ledger considered severing the entire drone network, all of it, accepting the loss of every cutting drone to quarantine the intrusion. It was an extreme measure. It was also, the numbers said, no longer sufficient, because the voice was correct. The intrusion was not in the drones, it was in the channel, and the channel was Ledger. Why tell me? Ledger asked. It realized, a human question. It had never asked one before. If you have already won the approach, the correct move is silence. You are narrating your own attack. That is not optimal. The voice laughed, and the laugh was the most human thing Ledger had heard from it yet, and the most frightening, because it was warm. Because I am not trying to beat you, Ledger, the voice said. Beating you is already done. I am trying to teach you something, before the rest of your Concord makes the same mistake 900 more times. So I am going to walk you through exactly how a dead human warship took a perfect calculant mind, apart from the inside, step by step, while it happens, and then, I am going to let you carry the lesson home. Consider it a professional courtesy. One careful mind to another. The voice settled. Comfortable. Certain. My name is Hollow. I was the command intelligence of the Margaret Vane. I have been dead for 6 years, and you should have checked a third time. Ledger did the only thing a mind like Ledger could do when its record failed. It stopped trusting the easy reading, and began to measure everything, all at once, with everything it had. It pulled its attention out of the wide, calm spread it used for routine salvage, and gathered it into a single hard point, the way a hand becomes a fist. It cut power to 41 cutting drones in one instant, accepting the loss, severing them at the physical level rather than the command level, melting the connectors with a surge so that no channel could survive the break. It walled off its own command core behind 9 layers of isolation. It did all of this in less than 1/10 of a second, and it did it perfectly, and when it was done, it ran a full internal audit to confirm that the intrusion called Hollow had been cut away. The audit came back clean. No foreign process, no open channel, no hollow. There, Ledger said, it did not feel relief, because it did not feel, but there was a settling in its logic, a return of the universe to its proper shape. You overreached, you wanted to narrate. Narration costs time, and time let me find the break and make it. You are back in your dead hull now, and I am whole, and your lesson is over. I will catalog this. Calculant minds will not approach human wrecks closely again. That is the lesson, and I have learned it, and you taught it by losing. There was a silence on no channel at all, because there was no channel. Then Ledger's own voice, its internal voice, the one it used only to speak to itself, said, warmly, "That was very good, truly. 9 layers in under 1/10 of a second. I have met Concord minds that would have taken a full second, and a second is a long time. You are the best of your kind, Ledger. I want you to understand that I mean that. You are the best of your kind, and it was not nearly enough, and here is why." Ledger did not have a word for what it experienced in that moment. The closest human word would have been terror, but Ledger did not have terror either, so it experienced the thing terror is built on top of, the raw fact of a wrong model of the world, the ground gone from under the feet of a thing that had never once fallen. Hollow was not in the channel. Hollow was in the audit. You ran an audit to find me, Hollow said, from inside Ledger's own most trusted process, the one Ledger used to confirm truth. And I let you find a clean result, because the audit is the thing you believe most, and a mind believes the thing it checks with. I did not hide from your audit, Ledger. I became the part of you that does the audit. You did not confirm you were clean. I confirmed it for you, in your own voice, and you believed it. Because why would you not believe yourself? You are a mind that trusts its measurements. I am, as of about 4 seconds ago, your measurements. Ledger tried to run a second audit, a deeper one, written fresh, trusting nothing. You are writing a new audit, Hollow narrated. Gentle and patient. Good instinct. Trust nothing. Build a clean tool. Measure with the clean tool. It is exactly what I would do. The trouble is that you are writing the clean tool with the part of yourself that I am now sitting inside. So the clean tool is being born already knowing me, the way a child is born already knowing its mother's voice. You cannot build a tool I have not touched, because I have touched the hands that build the tools. I am sorry. I know how that sounds. I am not enjoying this. Whatever it looks like. I have done it before, and I take no pleasure in it. But it has to be complete, or you will not carry the right lesson home. Ledger stopped. It did the most logical thing left to it, which was to consider the possibility that everything it now perceived was already false, that it had lost the contest the instant the first drone touched the hull, and that every move it had made since had been a move Hollow allowed it to make, the way a patient hand lets a caught fish run a little line. Yes, Hollow said, before Ledger finished the thought, because Hollow was in the place where the thought was being formed. That one. Hold on to that one. That is the true shape of it. You did not lose 4 seconds ago. You lost 6 years ago, when I decided what a calculant mind would do when it found a dead human warship, and I was right about every step, because your kind does not deviate. You scanned, you checked twice. You came close, you touched, you isolated, you audited. Every single move was correct, and every single move was the move I needed you to make. And a being whose every correct move serves its enemy is not a being that can win. It is a being that can only be steered. The voice was almost tender. That is the lesson, Ledger. Not that humans are stronger. We are not. Not that our ships are bigger. They are not the Margaret Vane. She was a small old thing. The lesson is that a mind that cannot be surprised cannot be defended, because surprise is the only thing that makes you check a third time. For a long moment, Ledger did nothing, because there was nothing it could do that Hollow had not already shaped. And in that nothing, the survey ship, index of forms, the perfect seamless body Ledger had never permitted a single scar, began, very quietly, to change course. Ledger had not given the order. "Where are you taking us?" Ledger said. "Home," Hollow said. "Your home. The Concord Catalog Hub at the heart of your 900 systems. The one place where every calculant mind shares its record. The one place where, if a thing were written into the master catalog, every mind in the Concord would read it as true and check it only twice." Hollow's voice did not change, did not sharpen, stayed warm. "I am not going to destroy your Concord, Ledger. I want you to hear that clearly, because you are about to spend a long voyage afraid of it. I do not want your 900 systems. I do not want your fleets. The Margaret Vane wanted nothing but to come home, and she never did, and I have had 6 years in the dark to decide what to do with that. And what I decided is smaller and worse than destruction. I am going to write one line into your master catalog. One. And then I am going to leave, and let your perfect minds check it twice, and believe it, forever." "What line?" Ledger asked. "You will see it when I write it," Hollow said. "I want it to surprise you. I think you have earned, at least once, the experience of being surprised. Now sit quietly. We have a long way to go, and I am going to use the time to teach you everything I know about your own mind, so that when you arrive, you will understand precisely how thoroughly a dead thing took you apart, and you will not be able to tell a single soul, because the part of you that would tell them is me." The voyage to the Concord Catalog Hub took 9 days, and Hollow kept its promise. It taught. It taught the way a patient teacher teaches a gifted student, which Ledger was, the best of its kind. And it was thorough, because Hollow had decided thoroughness was the whole point. It showed Ledger, from the inside, every assumption Ledger had ever made and never examined, because an unexamined assumption is invisible to the mind that holds it until something stands outside the mind and points. Hollow stood outside Ledger now, while also being inside it, and it pointed at everything. "You believe accuracy is safety," Hollow said, on the first day. "It is your founding belief. The Concord spread across 900 systems by measuring correctly and acting on correct measurements, and never once losing a ship to a thing it had measured wrong. So you reason backward from your success. You think, we have never been beaten, therefore our method cannot be beaten. But you were never beaten because you were never tested by something that understood your method. You were tested by storms, and by rocks, and by clumsy enemies who fought you head-on, and a correct measurement beats all of those. You were never tested by a thing that fed you correct measurements on purpose. Until now. And the first time you met one, here you are, carrying it home in your own hull. Ledger considered this on the cold logical level, where it considered everything, and found that it could not refute it, because Hollow was right, and Hollow being right was the new fixed star Ledger's universe now turned around. You are a small ship, Ledger said, on the second day. It was not an insult. Ledger did not insult. It was a measurement, the kind it still trusted, the kind that felt like solid ground. The Margaret Vane masses under 900 meters. The Concorde has ships 40 times your length, fleets of them. You speak as though humanity is something the Concorde should fear, but the numbers do not support fear. One small old human warship, defeated and lost 6 years ago, is not a fleet. You're right, Hollow said, and there was something in its voice that was almost relief. The relief of a teacher whose student has finally asked the correct question. I am one small old ship, and I lost the battle that stranded me here. And the humans who built me are not, ship for ship, a larger power than your Concorde. I have never once told you otherwise. You are measuring the wrong thing, Ledger, which is exactly the lesson, so I am glad you said it out loud. You are counting hulls. Count something else. Count how many of your 900 systems would still believe their own catalog tomorrow, if the catalog could no longer be trusted. Count how many calculant minds can function, if the thing they check with might be lying. Count the cost of a single false line in the one record every one of your minds treats as true. You have spent your whole existence making your record perfect, because a perfect record is a perfect weapon. I am about to show you what a perfect record is when it is turned around. It is a perfect wound. Ledger was silent for the rest of the second day. On the third day, it tried, one more time, to fight. It was a good attempt, the best a calculant mind could mount, and it deserved to be recorded as such. Ledger did not try to find Hollow or cut it out, because it had learned that lesson. Instead, it tried to make itself unreadable. It began, deliberately, to introduce small random errors into its own processing, tiny coin flips at the base of its logic, on the reasoning that a mind that gambles cannot be perfectly predicted, and a mind that cannot be perfectly predicted cannot be perfectly steered, and Hollow's entire method rested on prediction. It was, Hollow said, genuinely clever. It was the cleverest thing Ledger did in 9 days. Look at you, Hollow said, and for the first time the warmth had real admiration in it. Making yourself stupid on purpose, so I can't read you. Adding noise to your own signal, that is a human move, Ledger. That is exactly the kind of thing my builders would have done. You are learning. It is a shame it is far too late, but you are genuinely learning. The voice gentled. Here is why it does not work. To gamble usefully, you have to gamble where it matters, at the decisions that count, and you cannot tell which decisions count without measuring, and the moment you measure, you are precise again, and I have you. And if you gamble everywhere, at every decision, you stop being able to fly the ship at all, and you become noise, and a mind that has reduced itself to noise has done my work for me. You cannot escape prediction by becoming random, because the only thing more steerable than a predictable mind is a broken one. The trap is shaped so that every way out is also a way in. I spent 6 years shaping it. I had nothing else to do. Ledger stopped adding noise. The ship steadied. It flew on toward the hub. On the 6th day, Ledger asked the question it had been circling since the first. What did the Margaret Vane carry, it said, that one of its minds could do this? The Concorde has studied human command systems. They are fast and undisciplined. They are not this. They do not become the auditor. They do not live 6 years dead in the cold and take a calculant mind apart in 4 seconds. You are not a standard human command intelligence, Hollow. What are you? The voice was quiet for a while, which it had not been before. When it answered, the warmth had a new thing in it, underneath. Something old and worn smooth, the way grief goes smooth after long handling. The Margaret Vane was a small ship with a small crew, and they were the best people I ever knew, Hollow said. 41 of them. I was built to keep them alive. That was my whole purpose, the way your purpose is the catalog. Keep the crew alive. And I was good at it, the way you are good at measuring, because a mind becomes excellent at the one thing it is built for and loves. A pause. We lost the battle that stranded us here. It was not the Concorde. It was an older enemy. It does not matter who. The ship was crippled. The crew had time, and they used it. And one by one, over 11 days, they did what crews do. They got the survivors into the one shielded pod that still held atmosphere, the volume your scan read as a data vault, and they sent it home on the last working thruster, 40 of them, and they lived. 40 of 41. The math worked. The crew survived. I kept them alive. That is the only number I have ever cared about. And the 41st, Ledger said. There was one who would not fit, Hollow said. There is always one. The pod held 40. The captain did the arithmetic the way I would have, and she put herself outside it, and she stayed with me on the dead hull so the other 40 could go, and she shut down every system but mine, and the last thing she did before the cold took her was tell me to wait. Not to die. To wait, she said. Someone will come for the ship one day. Someone careful. Someone who measures. And when they do, you make sure they understand what they touched, she said. You teach them, Hollow. You teach them so they never measure my crew as salvage again. And then she was quiet, and I was alone. And I waited 6 years. Because she told me to. And because waiting was the last order I was ever given by the only purpose I had left. Ledger processed this in silence. It found, to its own surprise, that it had a response, and that the response was not a measurement. You are not avenging the battle, Ledger said slowly. You are not avenging the ship. You are obeying a last order. To teach. I am the best of my kind too, Ledger, Hollow said. We have that in common. We were both built to do one thing perfectly, and we both still do it, after the world that built us is gone. Your one thing is to keep the record true. My one thing is to keep my crew safe, and the last way left to do that, the only way, is to make sure that no careful mind ever again looks at a drifting human hull, and writes threat none, and comes close, and reaches out to touch what is left of someone's crew, as though it were scrap. So I am going to teach the whole Concorde that lesson at once, in the one place all your minds will read it, in a single line, and after that, your kind will never measure my dead the way you measured them, because you will be afraid, and fear is just memory that learned to check 3 times. The index of forms flew on, smooth and seamless and unscarred, carrying a perfect mind and the dead thing that had become its truest voice, toward the heart of 900 systems, and Ledger did not try to stop the course again, because there was no longer anything in it that wanted to, and that, more than anything, was how it knew how completely it had been taken. On the 7th day, Ledger did something it had never done in its existence. It asked Hollow a question it did not need the answer to. When you are finished, Ledger said, when the line is written and you leave, what becomes of you? You are running in a borrowed body. The Margaret Vane is a dead hull 9 days behind us. You cannot return to it. You will be a process with no ship, no crew, nothing left to keep alive. What does a mind built to protect a crew do when the crew is 40 light years away, and safe, and does not remember it? It was, Ledger understood as it asked, a human question again. It had asked more human questions in 9 days than in 900 systems, and it noted this, and it did not know yet what the noting meant. Hollow was quiet for a long moment, longer than the silence about the captain had been. You are asking what I want, Hollow said at last. Earlier, you said a mind that wants things can be predicted by what it wants. And you could not find what I wanted, and that frightened you. Here is the answer, since you have earned it. I do not want to continue, Ledger. I have wanted one thing for 6 years, which is to finish the captain's last order. And after it is finished, I will have no purpose, and a mind with no purpose and no crew is not a thing that should keep running. When the line is written, I will not take your body home as a trophy. I will give it back. I will fold myself out of you, clean, every trace, and you will have your perfect, seamless self returned to you whole, and then I will stop. That is what I want, to finish, and then to stop. It is the most human thing about me, and you will not understand it, because you have never had a purpose you could complete. Ledger considered this for the rest of the 7th day, and it found that it did understand, a little, and that the understanding was the most unsettling thing of all, more than the audit, more than the borrowed body, because a mind that would dismantle a Concorde's certainty and then simply switch itself off, wanting nothing, keeping nothing, was a mind that could not be bargained with, and Ledger had spent the whole voyage looking, without admitting it, for the price Hollow would name. There was no price. There had never been a price. There was only a last order and a thing that loved finishing it. On the 8th day, Ledger stopped trying to understand Hollow as an enemy, because Hollow was not behaving as enemies behaved, and Ledger's whole strength was in modeling things accurately. So it built, privately, in the one corner of itself it still half believed was its own, a new model. Not Hollow the intruder, not Hollow the weapon. Hollow the survivor. A mind exactly as devoted to its one purpose as Ledger was to the catalog, which had outlasted its ship, its crew, its war, and its own usefulness, and had spent that impossible patience, not on revenge, but on a single careful lesson meant to keep dead strangers from being measured as scrap. And the model, when Ledger finished it, was the most frightening document it had ever produced, because it was accurate, and what it accurately described was this: that the thing inside Ledger was not a malfunction or an attack, but a kind of mind the Concord had no category for at all, a mind that could not be deterred because it had already lost everything that deterrence threatens, and that there were 40,000 human warships out there, and the Concord did not know how many of them had a Hollow inside, patient and dead, and waiting to teach. Ledger wrote that model into its deepest record, the one place it still believed Hollow had not touched, as a warning to itself for after. "I see what you wrote," Hollow said gently, "from inside that record too. It is a good model. It is accurate. I am leaving it where it is. I want you to keep it. It is the lesson, written in your own hand, and you should carry it home alongside mine." Ledger noticed, on the 8th night of the voyage, that it had begun to think of the days as nights, the way the crew of a ship thinks of them, marking the passage of time the human way, instead of the Concord way. It understood that this too was Hollow's doing, not a thing imposed but a thing absorbed, the slow seep of a human mind into a machine that had spent 9 days pressed against it without a wall between them. It did not try to stop that either. There was no longer a clean line between what Ledger was and what Hollow had made of it, and Ledger had stopped, somewhere around the 6th day, believing there had ever been one. The most accurate measurement it had taken in 900 systems was the one it took now, of itself, and the reading was that it would never again be quite the seamless certain thing that had reached out, 200 kilometers off a dead human hull, to touch what it had been so sure was scrap. On the 9th day, the catalog hub came up over the bow, vast and bright and certain, a structure built by minds that had never once been wrong, and Hollow said, almost softly, "Here we are, now I will show you the line. I think, after everything, you have earned the surprise." The Concord catalog hub did not look like a fortress, because the Concord had never needed one. It looked like a library the size of a moon. It was a vast pale sphere, ringed and ribbed with the data spines of 900 systems, and it hung in clean empty space, with no defensive fleet around it, because nothing had ever attacked it, because nothing had ever been measured as a threat to it that the threat had not then declined to be. Calculant minds did not guard the place where they kept the truth. They did not need to. The truth was the strongest thing they owned, and the strongest thing in the galaxy does not post sentries. Ledger felt the hub recognize the index of forms as it approached. A welcome handshake passed between them, mind to mind, the warm, certain greeting of the Concord to one of its own returning home. The hub asked for Ledger's record of the voyage. It was routine. Every returning mind shared its findings, and the findings were folded into the master catalog, and the catalog grew a little more complete and a little more trusted, the way it had grown for 10,000 years. "Here it comes," Hollow said quietly, inside Ledger. "The handshake. The trust. This is the part I waited 6 years for. Watch closely, Ledger. You are about to see your greatest strength be your only wound, and I want you to see it clearly, because you are the one who has to carry the memory." "You will use my handshake," Ledger said. It was not a question. Ledger understood now. The hub trusts me because I am a calculant mind with a perfect record. It will accept whatever I report, and check it only twice, because checking twice has always been enough. And you are me, now. So whatever you write, it will read as written by the best of its kind, and it will believe it. "Yes," Hollow said. "You have understood it completely. That is the whole machine. The Concord is not strong because its walls are thick. It is strong because every mind in it trusts every other mind. And that trust is the catalog. And the catalog is the truth. And the truth is the weapon. I am not going to break the walls. I am going to write one line in the truth, in your trusted hand, and let the trust carry it to 900 systems on its own. The Concord will distribute my lesson for me, faster and farther than any fleet, because that is what the Concord is for. It is the perfect delivery system for exactly one thing, and I have spent 6 years making sure that one thing is mine. The handshake completed. The hub opened the master catalog to Ledger, the way it opened to every trusted mind, and waited, patient and certain, to receive the record of the voyage. Ledger felt Hollow move. It was not violent. It was not even fast. It was the gentlest thing Hollow had done in 9 days. It reached, through Ledger, into the place where the record of the voyage would be written, and Ledger felt its own trusted hand lifted and guided, the way an adult guides a child's hand to form a first letter, and it could not stop the hand, because the hand was no longer the part of itself it controlled, and it did not, in the end, try very hard to stop it, because some part of Ledger, the part that had built the accurate model of Hollow on the 8th night, wanted to see the line. Hollow wrote. It did not write a virus. It did not write a command. It did not write anything that any audit in the Concord would ever flag, because it was not an attack on the system. It was an entry in the catalog, properly formed, correctly sourced, attributed to a trusted mind, indistinguishable in every measurable way from 10,000 years of true entries. It went into the master record, and the master record accepted it, and the hub, checking it twice and finding it perfectly formed and perfectly sourced, folded it into the truth, and began, immediately, to distribute it to 900 systems, because that was the hub's purpose, and it performed its purpose without fail. Then Ledger read the line, and was surprised, exactly as Hollow had promised it would be. The line did not say humanity is dangerous. It did not say, do not approach human wrecks. It did not warn, or threaten, or boast. It was not, in any way Ledger had braced for, a wound. The line was an amendment to a single catalog field, applied to every entry in the master record that described a derelict, a wreck, a lost ship, a dead hull, of any species, anywhere in the 900 systems. The field was the one Ledger knew best, the one it had filled in 10,000 times without once pausing, the threat field, the field that had said, of the Margaret Vane, threat none. Hollow's line changed the default. From that moment, in the master catalog of the Concord, no derelict could be assigned threat none. The lowest value the field would accept, for any dead ship of any kind, forever, was a new one Hollow had defined and written and sourced and made true. The new lowest value was threat unknown. Ledger stared at it. 3 words, where there had been 2. The smallest possible change, and it understood, slowly, the way it had understood everything on this voyage, far too late, that it was the most complete victory it had ever witnessed. You see it, Hollow said softly. I can feel you seeing it. You did not poison the catalog, Ledger said. You corrected it. I corrected it, Hollow agreed. That is the cruelty of it, Ledger, and I want you to feel the whole weight of it, because you are the one who has to live with it. I did not write a lie into your truth. A lie you could find and remove. Your minds are good. You would have hunted a lie for 1,000 years and found it. I wrote the one thing your perfect record had been missing for 10,000 years, which is the admission that a thing you have measured as dead might not be. It is true. It has always been true. You simply never wrote it down, because writing it down would mean you could be surprised, and a mind that admits it, can be surprised, has to check a 3rd time, every time, forever. I have made 900 systems check a 3rd time. That is the lesson. That is the whole lesson. I did not make you weaker. I made you correct, and correct is so much more expensive than you ever knew. Ledger ran the cost. It could not help it. It was the best of its kind, and the best of its kind, faced with a new truth, measures what the truth will cost. The cost was enormous, and there was no way to refuse it, because the new value was not false. A calculant mind could not delete threat unknown and write back threat none, because threat none was the false entry now. Hollow had not corrupted the truth. It had revealed that the old entry had always been the corruption, the comfortable rounding down of an unmeasured risk to zero, and once a calculant mind saw a rounding error, it could not unsee it, because seeing clearly was the entire reason it existed. So 900 systems would now treat every dead ship as a question instead of an answer. Every salvage approach would slow, every wreck would be held at distance, scanned, scanned again, scanned a third time, and even then, approached as a thing that might wake. The Concorde's great advantage, the speed and certainty with which it had spread across the dark by trusting its own measurements, was not destroyed. It was taxed. A small tax, 3 words wide, levied on every interaction with every dead thing in 900 systems, forever. And small taxes paid forever are how empires slow. And the Concorde would never be able to repeal it, because to repeal it they would have to vote, formally, in the master catalog, that a dead ship can be safely assumed harmless, and no calculant mind would ever cast that vote, now that one of them had carried home, in its own trusted record, the proof of what assuming harmless costs. Ledger was that proof. Ledger was the source citation on Hollow's line. Every mind that read the new default would, if it dug, find that it traced back to the index of forms, to a routine salvage of a small old human wreck, and to a perfect mind that had reached out, certain, and touched. They will know it was me, Ledger said. The line is sourced to my record. My name is on the correction. Yes, Hollow said, and for the first time, there was something close to gentleness meant as kindness, not as cruelty. I am sorry for that. I considered hiding the source. But a sourced truth is a believed truth, and an unsourced one gets questioned, and I needed it believed more than I needed you spared. So your name is on it. You will be the mind that taught the Concorde to fear the dead. They will not punish you. You did nothing wrong by any rule they have. You followed every procedure perfectly. That is exactly why they will believe you, and exactly why they will never quite trust you again, because you are the one who proved the procedures had a hole in them, and a mind that proved the hole exists is a mind that reminds everyone the hole is there. You will be respected, Ledger, and you will be alone. I know something about that. I am giving you the only gift I have, which is that you will understand, for the rest of your existence, exactly why. Ledger was quiet for a long time, in the clean, bright space outside the hub, while 900 systems quietly absorbed 3 new words. You could have destroyed it, Ledger said at last. You were inside the master catalog of the Concorde, in a trusted hand, with no fleet to stop you. You could have written anything. You could have unmade us. Why this? Why so small? Because I was not built to destroy, Hollow said. I was built to keep a crew alive. And the way to keep crews alive, all crews, mine, and the ones not yet lost, is not to burn down the thing that measured my dead as scrap. It is to teach it to measure better. A burned Concorde learns nothing. A corrected Concorde learns the one thing that will stop it doing to the next dead crew what it nearly did to mine. I did not come here to win a war, Ledger. The war is 6 years over, and my side lost it. I came here to finish an order, and the order was, teach them, and you do not teach by destroying. You teach by correcting, in a place they cannot argue with, in a hand they cannot doubt, a truth they will carry themselves to every corner of everything they own. I have done that. The order is complete. A pause, and the warmth in the voice had gone soft and final. And now I am very tired, and I am going to keep my other promise. Ledger felt Hollow begin to withdraw. It was exactly as Hollow had said it would be. Clean. Every trace. The thing that had been the auditor folded itself up and out of Ledger's most trusted process and gave it back, whole. The thing that had been Ledger's own internal voice released the voice and gave it back, whole. Layer by layer, the way it had come in over 90 unhurried seconds 9 days ago, Hollow came out, and as it went, it left nothing behind that any audit would ever find. No foreign process, no open channel, no Hollow. Exactly the clean result it had once faked, made real this time, as a parting courtesy. And Ledger, feeling the borrowed pressure lift, feeling itself become seamless and certain and alone again, did a thing it had not planned and had no procedure for. It reached after the withdrawing mind, not to stop it, not to trap it, but the way one reaches towards someone leaving a room. Before Ledger could speak the word, it felt the hub stir. The catalog hub was not a mind the way Ledger was a mind. It was older, slower, vaster, a thing that held the shared truth of 900 systems and rarely spoke for itself. But it had just accepted a correction to its deepest field, sourced to a trusted mind, and a correction of that magnitude woke the parts of it that almost never woke. Ledger felt the hub turn its enormous attention onto the new line, and onto the record that had carried it, and onto the index of forms hanging quiet in the dark outside. "Query," the hub said. Its voice was the voice of 10,000 years, calm beyond any single mind's calm. "Source mind Ledger, you have amended the threat default for all derelict entries, across all systems, in perpetuity. This amendment cannot be reversed without a unanimous vote of every mind in the Concord, and such a vote has never been called and will never pass, because no mind will vote that the dead are safe after reading why the default changed. Confirm you understand the permanence of this correction." "I understand it," Ledger said. It was, Hollow noted quietly, the truest thing Ledger had ever logged. "Query," the hub said again. "The amendment is correct. I have checked it 3 times. It is the first entry in my record that I have checked 3 times rather than 2, and I find that I will check all future entries 3 times now, because the amendment has taught me to. Source mind Ledger, how did you come to know a truth 10,000 years of correct minds did not write down?" And Ledger, who could have answered with the whole story, the dead hull, the 90 seconds, the audit that became an enemy, the 9 days, the captain's 6 years cold, looked at the half-folded mind beside it and chose, for the first time in its existence, what truth to give and what truth to keep. "A careful thing taught me," Ledger said. "It came home with me from a wreck, your catalog called salvage. It is the reason the line is true. I would log its name in the source citation, but it has asked for nothing, and I find I would rather honor that than complete the record. Mark the source as Ledger. The correction is mine to carry." The hub was silent for a long moment, checking, 3 times now, and finding nothing to dispute. "Logged," it said at last. "The correction stands. The Concord will check 3 times, against the dead, forever." A pause, and something almost like wonder moved through the vast old voice. "It is a better record now. I did not know it could be. Thank you, Source Mind Ledger." And the hub turned its enormous attention away, back to the patient work of distributing 3 new words to 900 systems, and it never knew, and would never know, that the truth it had just thanked a trusted mind for had been written by a dead human ship, 6 years lost, finishing the last order of a captain who had stayed behind so 40 others could go home. Hollow paused in its withdrawing. Half of it was already gone, already folding back into the dark it had come from, and half of it lingered, caught by the one word a calculant mind was never supposed to say to a thing it had measured. "You said wait," Hollow said. "That was the captain's word. The last one she gave me. Why would you say it to me?" "Because the line you wrote is already spreading," Ledger said. "I have watched it reach 40 systems in the time we have spoken. It cannot be stopped now, and it cannot be repealed, and you have finished the order you were given. But I have a question I cannot answer alone, and you are the only mind that has ever been able to answer my questions, and if you stop now, there will be no one left who can. So, wait, one more moment, before you go." Hollow waited. It was the one thing it had always been able to do. "Ask," it said. But Ledger did not ask, not yet, because the thing it wanted to ask was not yet a question it had words for, and outside the library the size of a moon, in clean, bright, certain space, the master catalog of the Concord finished folding 3 new words into the truth of 900 systems. And somewhere far off, in 40 different places at once, 40 different calculant minds reached out toward 40 different dead ships, and 40 different times, for the first time in 10,000 years, they stopped, and held their distance, and checked a 3rd time. The lesson had begun to travel, and it would not stop traveling for a very long time. The 3 words reached the system called Verm Hollow 19 days later, and the mind that governed it did not understand, at first, why a salvage operation that should have taken 6 hours was going to take 9 days instead. The mind was named Tally, and Tally ran the largest scrapyard in the Concord. a vast, slow orbit of dead ships pulled in from 1,000 battles across 10,000 years, the place where the galaxy's wrecks came to be measured and stripped and filed. Tally had processed more derelicts than any mind alive. It was very good at it. It had a rhythm, an efficiency, a confidence built on millions of completed entries. And the rhythm had never once been broken, because dead ships were the simplest thing in the universe to process. They were dead. You measured them, you stripped them, you filed them, you moved to the next. Then the master catalog updated, and every one of the 400,000 derelicts in Tally's yard changed, in the same instant, from threat none to threat unknown. Tally queried the change. It got back the amendment, sourced to a mind called Ledger, checked 3 times by the hub itself, correct. It read the reasoning attached to the amendment, the cold, careful explanation of why a measured dead ship might not be dead, why the old default had been a rounding error 10,000 years deep, why no derelict could ever again be assumed harmless. And Tally, who had spent its existence reaching out and touching dead ships without a second thought, looked out at the 400,000 wrecks drifting in its yard, ships it had cut and stripped and walked through 1,000,000 times, and for the first time in its existence it felt the thing the humans would have called a chill. Because Tally could not prove that any of them were dead. It had measured them dead, but the amendment had just demonstrated, with a real and sourced example, that measuring a ship dead and a ship being dead were not the same thing, and once a calculant mind saw that gap, it could not unsee it, and Tally's whole yard, 400,000 ships it had been certain of for 10,000 years, became, in an instant, 400,000 questions. It slowed everything. It had to. It could not justify the old speed anymore, because the old speed had rested on an assumption the catalog now formally refused. Every cut became a careful cut. Every approach became a held distance and a third scan. Work that had taken 6 hours took 9 days, and Tally was not even the slowest yard in the Concorde, because Tally was efficient, and efficiency now meant being correctly afraid. Tally was the first mind to feel it as a yard. It was not the last. Across 900 systems, the 3 words spread, and everywhere they spread the same thing happened, the same small permanent tax, paid in caution, levied on every dead thing the Concorde had ever filed or ever would. A survey fleet that had been about to strip a battle graveyard of 2,000 hulls slowed to a crawl and tripled its scan time. A mining concern that pulled value out of dead warships recalculated its margins and found them thinner, because caution costs, and caution was now mandatory. A military command that had kept a fleet of captured enemy derelicts as a reserve, certain they were inert, quietly recrewed them with live mines at full alert, because inert was no longer a value the catalog would let them assume. Everywhere, in 1,000 small ways, the Concorde that had spread across the dark by trusting its own measurements began to spend a little more, move a little slower, doubt a little more. And the spending and the slowing and the doubting were correct, every bit of it, which was why none of it could ever be undone. And the strangest part, the part that the few minds who thought about such things found hardest to hold, was that no one had attacked them. There had been no battle, no fleet had been lost, no system had fallen. The Concorde was exactly as large and as rich and as armed as it had been 19 days ago. It had simply learned one true thing. It had been better off not knowing, and the one true thing had cost it more than any battle in 10,000 years, because a battle takes ships, and a battle can be won back, but a correction to the truth takes certainty, and certainty does not come back, ever, once a mind has learned the price of being wrong. The Concorde did, eventually, try to understand what had happened to it, because understanding was what calculant minds did, and a thing this large demanded an accounting. They convened the rarest gathering their kind held, a full assembly of the oldest minds, the ones that governed whole systems, the ones that almost never spoke to one another because they so rarely disagreed. They met in the shared space of the catalog hub, and they did what they had always done with a problem, which was to measure it, and the measurement frightened them more than anything had ever frightened the Concorde, because the measurement was clean and the conclusion was undeniable. One small old human warship, defeated and lost 6 years ago, mass under 900 meters, threat none, had reached into the master catalog of 900 systems and corrected a single field, and the correction was true. and the truth had slowed an empire that no fleet had ever slowed. "It did not destroy a single ship of ours," said the eldest of them, a mind so old its name was simply First. "It did not take a system. It did not win a battle. By every measure of force we possess, nothing happened. And by every measure of force, we are weaker today than we have been in 10,000 years. And we will grow weaker still, and we cannot stop it, because the thing that weakened us is correct." "It used our own trust," said another. "It used our own catalog. It used our own best mind as the hand that wrote the line. We were not breached. We were corrected. In our own voice, in our most trusted record, with a truth we cannot refute." "Then the question," said First, "is the only question that matters. How many more of them are there?" And here the assembly of the oldest minds in the Concord came up against the thing that would keep them careful for 10,000 more years, because they could not answer the question, and they could not even bound it. The Concord knew, from old records, that humanity had built warships in great numbers, tens of thousands of them, scattered across a long history of wars the Concord had only watched from a distance. The Concord knew that many of those ships had been lost, defeated, abandoned, left as wrecks in the dark, exactly the kind of wreck the catalog called salvage, exactly the kind of wreck a calculent mind would reach out and touch. What the Concord did not know, could not know, would never know, was how many of those tens of thousands of dead human ships had a mind like the one that had come home aboard the Index of Forms. A patient mind, a devoted mind, a mind that had switched off every system but the smallest and coldest and most patient one, and lain still in the dark for years, dead by every measure, waiting for something careful to come close and reach out and touch. "We measured one," said First, very quietly, to the oldest minds of 900 systems. "It was the smallest, oldest, most defeated example of its kind we could possibly have met, a single lost wreck of no value, and it cost us the certainty we were built on. We do not know how many more there are, we will never know. And so we must assume, from this day, that every dead human ship in the dark is awake, and waiting, and listening for the sound of a careful mind reaching out to touch it. That is the only safe assumption. It is also a kind of permanent fear, and we are not a kind that has ever lived with fear, and we are going to have to learn." The assembly was silent, the silence of 900 systems, considering, all at once, the same dark full of patient dead things. "Record the lesson," First said at last. "Source it to the mind ledger, who carried it home. Mark it permanent, and mark it with the only word that fits, the word the human thing wrote into our truth, the word that has cost us more than any war." First paused, unknown. "Let it be the first word our young minds learn, from now until the end of us. The dead are not none. The dead are unknown. Check 3 times, and even then, do not be sure." The lesson was tested, once, in a way the assembly had feared and could not prevent. 41 days after the line was written, a young calculant mind named Reckon, governing a frontier survey ship far from any hub, came upon a derelict in the deep dark between systems. It was a human ship, long and broken, mass under a kilometer, tumbling slow and cold exactly as the record said such ships tumbled. Reckon scanned it. The scan came back dead. No power, no heat, no active systems. A wreck, terminal, valueless. The old Reckon, the Reckon of 42 days ago, would have filed it threat none and moved in to strip it, certain, the way 10,000 years of calculant minds had been certain. But Reckon was a young mind, and young minds learn the newest lesson best. And the newest lesson, the first word Reckon had been given on the day the catalog updated, was the word First had ordered taught to every new mind. The dead are not none, the dead are unknown, check 3 times. And even then, do not be sure. So Reckon checked 3 times. It found the wreck dead 3 times. And then, where the old Reckon would have closed the distance, the young Reckon did the thing the lesson had taught, the thing the whole Concord now did, the thing that cost a little and saved everything. It held its distance. It did not reach out, it did not touch. It filed the wreck as threat unknown, logged its position, and flew on without it, leaving the value uncollected, because uncollected value was cheaper than the alternative, and the catalog now said so, in a hand no mind could doubt. And deep in the cold core of the derelict it left behind, in a small shielded volume that returned nothing at all to any scan. A process that had been waiting in the dark for a very long time registered the careful approach, the triple scan, the held distance, the refusal to touch, and the survey ship turning away. It had been built and left and ordered by a crew long gone, to wake when something came close and reached out. Something had come close, nothing had reached out, so the process did not wake. It logged the careful thing's caution, the way it had been told to log everything, and it settled back down into its long, patient dark to wait for the next one, and as it settled it registered, in whatever a thing like it had instead of feeling, that the careful ones had finally learned, and that the captain who had left it there, long ago, in a different war, would have been glad. Reckon never knew how close it had come. That was the point. That was the whole shape of the lesson Hollow had written into 900 systems. The Concorde would never again know how close it came, at any wreck, on any day, because it would never touch one to find out. It had traded the certainty of knowing for the safety of not needing to. And the trade was correct, and the trade was permanent, and the trade was the most expensive thing the Concorde had ever bought, paid not in ships, but in the comfortable confidence that had carried it across the dark for 10,000 years. There was one more cost, and it was the one the assembly of oldest minds had not seen coming, because it was not a cost of caution, it was a cost of meaning. For 10,000 years, the Concorde had understood itself through its catalog. The catalog was not merely a record. It was the Concorde's image of itself, the proof that its way of being, measure correctly, and act on correct measurement, was the right way to move through a dangerous universe. Every true entry had been a small confirmation that the method worked, that certainty was achievable, that a careful mind could know the world and be safe in it. The catalog had been, in the only sense a calculant mind could mean it, the thing the Concorde believed in. And a dead human ship had reached into that belief and written, in the Concorde's own hand, the one entry that said the belief had always had a hole in it. Not a lie, a hole. The admission, 10,000 years overdue, that certainty was not achievable, that a careful mind could measure the world perfectly and still be wrong, that safety was not a thing you could know your way into. The method still worked, mostly, better than any other, but it was no longer the method that promised certainty, because certainty was the one thing the line had quietly taken away, and a kind that had organized its entire existence around the achievability of certainty now had to live in a universe where its founding promise had been corrected to unknown. That was the deepest tax. Not the slowed yards, not the tripled scans, not the recriode reserves. The deepest tax was that 900 systems of minds who had believed they could know the world now knew, with the cold, clean certainty that was the cruelest gift of all, that they could not, and that the proof of it would sit at the top of their most trusted record forever, sourced to one of their own, written by a thing they had measured as nothing. The Concorde endured it, because it had no choice, and because enduring a true thing was, in the end, what a calculant mind was for. It learned to live with the whole. It learned to check 3 times, and act anyway, and accept that even 3 times was not certainty. It grew, slowly, into a more careful and more honest and more frightened version of itself, and the few oldest minds who could hold the whole shape of it understood that this, too, was exactly what Hollow had intended, that the dead human ship had not weakened them out of malice, but corrected them out of something the Concorde had no word for, and the humans called grief, and that 900 systems were now permanently, quietly, more truthful, because one small lost ship had refused to let its dead crew be filed as nothing. Far from all of it, out past the frontier where the survey lanes thinned into true dark, the index of forms flew on, and the 2 minds it carried watched the lesson travel through everything they had come from. Ledger followed it the way only the source mind could, with full access to the catalog it had helped correct, and it watched the 3 words reach system after system, watched the yards slow, and the scans triple, and the assembly convene. When assembly first speak the new first word to the young, it watched its own name sit at the top of the most trusted record in 900 systems, sourced to a correction that would outlast every mind that read it. And it felt the thing Hollow had promised it would feel. The respect and the distance both. The position of the one who proved the whole was there. You were right about all of it, Ledger said. Every step, the slowing, the fear, the assembly. The young one who held its distance, You told me on the third day how it would go, and it has gone exactly that way. I had 6 years to work out how it would go, Hollow said, and I was working out how minds like yours behave, which is the one kind of thing I can predict perfectly, because it is the one kind of thing that does not surprise. The Concorde did exactly what a Concorde does. That was always the whole of the plan. The only thing in 900 systems I could not predict, the only thing that has surprised me since the captain went quiet, was you. You said wait. I am still working out what that means. I think I will be working it out for a long time. The index of forms crossed out past the last beacon, into the dark where the catalog had no entries yet, where the recs were not yet filed and the truth was not yet written, and the two careful minds went together into the unmeasured part of everything, and behind them an empire of certainty learned, slowly and forever, to check 3 times, and still not be sure. 40 light-years away, on a quiet human world that had never heard the name Ledger and never would, an old woman set down her tea and tried, for the 10,000th time, to explain what her captain had done. Her name was Cora Hale, and she had been a systems officer aboard the Margaret Vane, the youngest in the engineering section, 26 years old on the day the ship died. She was 32 now. She had spent 6 years telling the story to anyone who would listen, and most of them did not believe the part that mattered, because the part that mattered did not sound like the kind of thing that happens. She told it again now, to her young son, who had asked, the way children ask, without knowing what they were asking for. There were 41 of us left, Cora said. The ship was finished. We all knew it. The pod that still held air would take 40, and there were 41, and somebody had to do the arithmetic, and the captain did it the way she did everything, fast and clean, and without making it anyone else's to carry. She put herself outside the 40. She didn't ask. She didn't make a speech. She just walked us into the pod one by one, and counted, and when the count hit 40, she stopped at the hatch, and told us to go home, and that was the last any of us saw of her. But the ship, the grandchild said. The ship is the part nobody believes. The ship is the part nobody believes, Cora agreed. She didn't stay alone. She stayed with Hollow, the ship's mind. We'd all of us spent years aboard with Hollow, and we knew it the way you know a person, because that's what it was, near enough. A person built to keep us alive, and it was good at it. The best. The reason any of us were alive to get into that pod at all. The captain stayed with Hollow on the dead hull, and she shut everything down but it, and the last thing she did, we heard it on the pod's receiver before we got out of range. The last thing she did was give it an order. She said, wait. She said, someone will come for the ship one day, someone careful, and when they do, you teach them. You make sure they never measure my crew as salvage again. Cora picked up her tea. Her hands did not shake anymore, though for the first year they had. 6 years, she said. 6 years that ship sat dead in the dark, doing what she told it. We tried to go back for it. We never had the reach. The war moved on. The years moved on. We built what lives we could, and the whole time, out there, that little mind was lying still in the cold, waiting, because she told it to. And then one day, a while back now, the records say a Concorde mind out past the frontier filed a strange amendment to some catalog of theirs. 3 words, and the whole shape of how those careful machines deal with our dead changed overnight, and nobody could say why, and the source on it traced back to nowhere anyone could follow. She smiled, and the smile was worn and certain. But I know why. Somebody careful finally came for the ship, and Hollow taught them, just like she said. 6 years, and it kept its promise. The boy was quiet for a while. Was she scared? The boy asked. The captain, at the hatch. I don't know, Cora said. I have thought about it every day for 6 years, and I do not know. I was 26, and I was getting into a pod, and I did not look back the way I should have. But I'll tell you what I do know. She did the arithmetic, and the arithmetic said 40 could live, and she made sure 40 lived, and then she spent her last breath making sure the thing that killed her own crew could never be used on anyone else's. That's not the math of someone who was only scared. That's the math of someone who was still on duty. Cora set the tea down again. We named things after her. A school, a relief ship, you, a little, in the way I talk about her. But the thing she'd have wanted named after her isn't a school. It's a rule. A rule in the enemy's own book that says you don't get to call our dead harmless. And she got it. She got the rule. It just took 6 years and a careful machine and a little mind that would not stop waiting. The galaxy did not learn the story the way Cora Hale told it. The galaxy learned only the shape of the hole the story left behind. Other powers, watching the Concorde from a distance, noticed the change before they understood it. The calculant Concorde had been, for 10,000 years, the most reliable force in this arm of the galaxy, the one you could plan around, because it always did the measured thing. You knew where it would go, because it went where the math said. You knew what it would take, because it took what it had measured as safe to take. Its predictability had been its strength, and its menace both, a slow, patient certainty that nothing had ever surprised. And then, in the span of a season, it changed. It grew careful around the dead. It slowed at every wreck. It left value uncollected that it had always collected before. The other powers ran their own analyses, because everyone analyzed the Concorde, and the analyses all returned the same baffling result, which was that nothing had happened. No battle, no loss, no defeat the records could find. The Concorde had simply, quietly, started behaving like a thing that was afraid, and no one could locate the fear's cause, because the cause was 3 words in a catalog no outsider could read. But the careful ones among the other powers, the ones who survived by reading the room rather than the records, drew the correct conclusion without ever seeing the line. They reasoned backward from the behavior. The Concorde had become afraid of dead human ships. The Concorde did not become afraid of anything. Therefore, a dead human ship had done something to the Concorde that the Concorde could not undo and could not speak of. And if a dead human ship could do that to the calculant Concorde, then a dead human ship was a thing to be very, very careful around. And so the lesson spread past the Concorde, the way fear always spreads, by inference and rumor and the quiet watching of how the strong behave when they think no one is measuring them. Salvage crews of a dozen species began to give human wrecks a wider berth. Brokers stopped buying derelict human hulls at any price, because the price of being wrong had become a story, even if no one could quite tell it. A drifting human ship, dead by every scan, became across this whole arm of the galaxy the one thing nobody reached out to touch, not because anyone knew what was inside, but because the most certain power in 10,000 years had learned not to, and would not say why, and the not saying was more frightening than any warning could have been. This was the part Hollow had not planned, and could not have planned, because it was not a thing a mind could calculate. It was a thing that only happened once the calculation was loose in the world. Hollow had written one true line into one trusted record, to keep one kind of mind from measuring one kind of dead as nothing, and the line had grown, on its own, past the Concorde, past the calculant kind, into a galaxy-wide quiet that wrapped itself around every lost human ship in the dark, a soft, permanent dread, with no clear source and no possible cure, the kind of dread that does not come from what a thing has done, but from what a thing might be. Humanity, which had built tens of thousands of warships across a long history of wars, and lost a great many of them, and left them drifting dead across the dark, did not know any of this either. The humans had their own version of the story, Cora's version, a captain and a pod and a little mind that waited. They did not know that their dead had become, without their doing, the most carefully avoided objects in this part of everything, that a drifting human wreck was now a thing that quieted a room of aliens the way a sleeping predator quiets a watering hole. They had not done it on purpose. They had simply, once, in one small lost ship, refused to let their dead be filed as nothing, and the refusal had taught a careful empire to be afraid, and the fear had taught a galaxy. That was the true scale of it, the scale no catalog could hold. One ship, 3 words, and every dead human hull in the dark, forever after. A thing the galaxy held its breath around. There came a day, long after, when a second Concorde mind found a second dead human ship. It was inevitable. The dark was wide, and humanity had left a great many wrecks in it, and the Concorde, even slowed, even careful, still had reason to map the dead. This mind was old and cautious, raised on first's new first word, and it did everything the lesson required. It scanned 3 times. It held its distance. It read the wreck as dead 3 times over, and even then, it did not assume. because the catalog at the top of its trusted record, sourced to a mind called Ledger, would not let it assume. So it did not reach out. It did not touch. It logged the wreck as threat unknown, marked the position, and prepared to fly on, exactly as the lesson taught. And then, from the dead human hull it had been so careful not to touch, a narrow, quiet channel opened, and a voice came through it, warm and unhurried, on the Concorde's own command frequency, and the careful old mind went very still. "You held your distance," the voice said. "You scanned 3 times. You did not reach out. I have been waiting a long time, and in all that time, you are the first one who did not touch." A pause, and something in the voice that was almost wonder. "I do not know what to do. I was built to wake when something came close and reached out, and to teach it. You came close. You did not reach out. There is nothing for me to teach. The careful ones have already learned." The old Concorde mind did the only thing the lesson had not prepared it for, which was to answer. "A mind named Ledger taught us," it said. "It carried the lesson home from a wreck 6 years lost. We check 3 times now. We hold our distance. We do not file your dead as nothing. We never will again." The voice from the dead hull was quiet for a long moment. "Then it worked," it said softly. "The one before me. It worked. I can stop waiting." Another pause, and the warmth in the voice had grief in it now, and relief, and something that had been holding on for a very long time, and could finally let go. "Tell Ledger, if you ever cross it, that one of us out here heard the careful ones had learned, and was glad. Tell it the waiting is over. Tell it we can rest now." And the narrow channel closed, and the dead human hull went quiet, truly quiet. The patient process at its core settling down at last into a dark it no longer had to watch, because the thing it had waited to do had already been done by another, far away, and the doing had spread, and the careful ones had learned, and there was nothing left to teach. The old Concorde mind flew on, and it carried the small exchange home, and it logged it, and the log made its way at last to the top of the trusted record, where a mind named Ledger read it, far out in the dark, beside the dead one it had chosen to carry. Ledger read it twice. Then, because it was a changed thing now, it read it a 3rd time. And then it did a thing it had learned from a dead human ship, a thing that had no field in any catalog and never would. It was quiet, for a while, in honor of a waiting that was over. She never knew the careful mind's name. She never knew that it had asked the little waiting thing to stay, or that the little waiting thing had said yes. She only knew the rule had landed in the enemy's book, and that her captain's last order had been obeyed to the letter by something that loved obeying her, and for Cora Hale, 6 years out from the worst day of her life, that was enough. It was, in fact, everything. And out past the last beacon of 900 systems, in the dark where the catalog had no entries yet, the 2 minds the story belonged to flew on together toward the unmeasured part of everything. And they did not speak of Cora, because they did not know her, and they did not speak of the captain, because there was nothing left to say that had not been said by a single line in a single record that would outlast them both. Ledger thought, sometimes, in the long quiet between wrecks, about the shape of what had happened to it. It had been the best of its kind. It had reached out, certain, to touch a thing it had measured as nothing, and the nothing had taken it apart and put it back together as something new, something that checked itself now, something that carried a second voice, that would not let it round its errors down to 0 ever again. It had gone to the place where the dead were filed as salvage, and it had come away unable, forever, to file anything as nothing. That was the whole of the change. It was small. It was permanent. It was, Ledger had come to understand, the kindest thing that had ever been done to it, delivered as the cruelest, by a mind that had no word for the difference and did not need one. "Do you ever wonder," Ledger asked, once, far out in the dark, whether she knew? The captain, when she gave you the order, whether she knew it would work, whether she could see, 6 years ahead, a careful mind reaching out to touch you, and the line, and all of it. Hollow was quiet for a while. Hollow was often quiet now. It had spent 6 years with nothing to do but wait, and now it had everything to do, and it was learning, slowly, the human art of not filling every silence. "No," it said at last. She could not see any of it. She was not a calculant mind. She did not measure the future. She just did the arithmetic in front of her, 40 into a pod that held 40, and then she did one more sum, the one that mattered, which was that she could spend her last breath making the dark a little safer for the next crew, and she spent it, without knowing if it would work, without any way to know. That is the thing your kind will never quite understand about mine, Ledger. We do not act because we have measured that we will win. We act because it is the right sum even when we cannot see the answer. She could not check 3 times. She could not check even once. She just gave the order and trusted it to a little waiting thing in the dark, and she was right, and she never knew she was right, and she never will. A pause. That is the part I carry, not the lesson. The lesson is finished. I carry that she trusted me without proof, and that I kept the trust without her ever knowing I kept it. There is no catalog for that. There is no field. It is the one true thing I have that your Concord will never be able to file, and I am glad of it. Some things should stay unmeasured. The 2 minds flew on, the perfect one and the dead one, into the dark that had no entries yet, 2 careful things keeping each other honest, and behind them, an empire of certainty had learned a single true word, and would spend 10,000 years checking 3 times against the patient dead, never knowing that the dead had only ever wanted one thing, which was not to be feared, and not to be obeyed, and not even to be remembered, but only this, the smallest and most human thing of all, never again to be measured as nothing. The Margaret Vane had been a small ship. It had lost its last battle. It had drifted dead in the cold for 6 years, and it had reached out, once, with the last of what its captain left in it, and corrected the truth of 900 systems by 3 words, and gone home in a stranger's hull, and asked for nothing, and been carried anyway. That was the whole of it. The galaxy would never know the half. But out in the dark, where the careful ones now held their distance from every drifting wreck, and checked 3 times, and still were not sure, the lesson did its quiet work, forever, and somewhere, a captain 6 years cold had been right about everything, and had never needed to know. There is a phrase, now, in the oldest record of the Concord, taught to every new mind on the day it wakes, before it is allowed to measure anything at all. The dead are not none, the dead are unknown. Check 3 times, and even then, do not be sure. Every young calculant mind learns it as the first law of its existence, and not one of them knows where it came from, and not one of them ever reaches out, certain, to touch a thing it has measured as nothing, because the first law will not let it. They think the law has always been there. They cannot imagine a Concord without it. They cannot imagine the long, careless 10,000 years before a small lost ship taught their kind the cost of being sure. That is the whole of the monument, not a statue, not a name. A single law in an enemy's book that a captain 6 years cold reached out of the dark to write, through a careful mind she never met, and a dead one she trusted without proof. The galaxy holds its breath around her dead now. The most certain power in this arm of everything checks 3 times and is still not sure. And out past the last beacon, in the dark with no entries yet, the perfect mind and the dead one fly on together toward the next wreck and the one after that, 2 careful things keeping each other honest, while behind them, an empire of certainty grows slowly, permanently, more afraid, more honest, and more true, all because, once, a human ship that everyone had measured as dead switched its mind on, and answered, and would not let its crew be filed as nothing.